A week later, at the diner, Lila's friend Sarah was clearing tables when she found a note slipped under a coffee mug. It was in Lila's handwriting, dated the night she died. "If I don't come back, check Jake's profile. There's more than one." Sarah's hands shook as she opened her phone, typing in the site's name. Jake's profile was gone, erased like he'd never existed. But as she scrolled, another caught her eye. A new face, a new name, but the same dark eyes, the same knowing smile. The bio read, "Looking for someone who's not afraid to feel." Sarah's breath caught. She looked around the empty diner, the rain still falling outside, and wondered who else was out there waiting. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, take a moment to comment below where you're watching from, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification button so you never miss another gripping unknown crime story. The rain came down in torrents, hammering the roof of Lila's one-bedroom apartment like 1,000 tiny fists. It was well past midnight, and the world outside her window was a blur of gray and shadow. Lila was 32, a woman whose laughter used to spill out like sunlight, warm and unguarded, but that was before life had worn her edges raw. The diner where she worked, 6 days a week, pouring coffee, scrubbing grease stains, smiling through the exhaustion, had become her whole world. Her nights were spent alone, eating microwave dinners in front of a flickering TV, the silence of her apartment heavier than the trays she carried. Loneliness wasn't just a feeling anymore, it was a presence curling around her heart, whispering that this was all there was. She tried to fill the void. Books helped, their pages carrying her to places she'd never see. Paris, Tokyo, anywhere but this small town with its endless gray skies. But lately, even stories couldn't quiet the ache. That's how she ended up on the site. It wasn't her kind of place, she'd always been shy about those things, but one sleepless night, with a bottle of cheap Merlot half empty on the counter, she'd clicked through a link she shouldn't have. The profiles were bold, unapologetic, a parade of strangers offering escape. And then she saw him. Jake. His photo stopped her cold. Dark eyes that seemed to see right through the screen, a jawline sharp enough to cut, and a smile that felt like a secret meant just for her. His bio was short, almost poetic. Looking for someone who's not afraid to feel. Lila's breath hitched. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, doubt and desire wrestling in her chest. She typed a message, deleted it, typed again. When she finally hit send, her heart thudded so loud she swore the neighbors could hear it. Jake replied within minutes, his words easy, playful. They talked about nothing at first. Favorite songs, worst dates, the kind of pizza that was worth fighting over. But soon their chats grew deeper, peeling back layers she hadn't touched in years. She told him how she felt invisible, like life was a movie she was watching from the back row. He didn't laugh or brush it off. He called her beautiful, said she deserved to be seen, to be felt. His words were a lifeline, pulling her out of the fog. Nights turned into weeks of messages, then phone calls, his voice low and warm, wrapping around her like a blanket. She'd lie on her couch, the phone pressed to her ear, smiling at the ceiling as he told her stories, some funny, some dark, all of them making her feel alive. When he suggested meeting, Lila froze. Was she ready? The idea of seeing him, touching him, made her stomach flip with a mix of fear and thrill. But the thought of saying no, of staying trapped in her quiet life, was worse. They settled on a motel just outside town, a rundown place where the neon sign flickered like it was on its last breath. It felt fitting, hidden like their late-night talks, a secret from the world. Lila spent the day of the meeting in a haze. She stood in front of her mirror, trying on dresses she hadn't worn in years. The blue one won, a soft, clinging thing that hugged her curves, making her feel bold, maybe even beautiful. She brushed her dark hair until it shone, dabbed on perfume she'd bought on a whim last Christmas. Her hands shook as she applied mascara, her reflection a stranger's. She wanted to be the woman Jake saw in her words, the one who wasn't afraid to feel. But as she packed her purse, keys, wallet, phone, a flicker of doubt crept in. Jake had always been vague about himself. When she'd asked about his job, he'd laughed, saying he worked with his hands building things. When she pressed for more, he'd changed the subject, his charm smoothing over the cracks. She'd let it go, caught up in the way he made her feel, but now, alone in her apartment, the questions lingered. Who was he really? She shook her head, scolding herself. This was nerves talking. She was about to meet someone who saw her, truly saw her. That was worth the risk. The drive to the motel was a blur of rain and headlights. Lila's wipers struggled to keep up, the world outside her car a smeared painting. Her radio played softly, some old love song that made her chest ache. She thought of her mother, gone 5 years now, who'd always told her to chase what made her heart race. You only get one life, baby, she'd said. Lila gripped the wheel tighter. This was her chance. The motel parking lot was nearly empty, the rain turning the asphalt into a mirror of flickering lights. Lila's headlights caught a figure leaning against a black car, and her breath caught. Jake. He was taller than she'd imagined, his frame filling the space like he owned it. His dark hair was damp from the rain, curling slightly at the edges, and his leather jacket gleamed under the neon glow. She parked, her hands trembling as she turned off the engine. For a moment she just watched him, her heart a wild thing in her chest. When she stepped out, the cold air bit her skin, but Jake's smile warmed her instantly. It was the same smile from his photo, the one that had pulled her in from the start. Her eyes met his, and then, almost without meaning to, her gaze drifted. She looked him up and down, taking in his broad shoulders, the way his shirt clung to his chest, the confident tilt of his hips. And there, impossible to miss, was a huge bulge in his trousers, straining against the fabric like a promise or a warning. Heat flooded her cheeks, her pulse quickening. She forced her eyes back to his face, but his smirk said he'd caught her staring. "Lila," he said, his voice low, carrying over the rain. "You made it." He stepped forward, pulling her into a hug that felt both safe and electric. His arms were strong, his scent a heady mix of leather, rain, and something sharper like metal. She laughed, shy, her nerves buzzing. "You look even better than I pictured," he said, his eyes lingering on her blue dress, tracing her curves. Her blush deepened, but she felt seen, desired. He took her hand, leading her toward the motel room, the rain shutting out the world behind them. Inside, the room was dim, the air heavy with the smell of mildew and old cigarettes. A single lamp cast shadows on the peeling wallpaper, and the bed sagged under a faded quilt. Jake shrugged off his jacket, tossing it over a chair, and poured her a drink from a flask he pulled from his pocket. "To us," he said, handing her the glass, his fingers brushing hers. Lila sipped, the liquor sharp, burning her throat. She didn't notice the faint bitterness, or the way Jake watched her, his eyes unblinking, like a predator sizing up its prey. They sat on the edge of the bed, talking, his hand resting lightly on her knee. Jake's stories were as captivating in person as they'd been over the phone, his laugh easing her lingering doubts. But when she stood to use the bathroom, something caught her eye. The door, the only way in or out, was locked. Not just the knob, but a deadbolt slid shut from the inside. Her stomach twisted. "Jake, why's the door locked like that?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He glanced over, his smile casual. "Habit. I don't like surprises." He patted the bed beside him. "Come back, Lila. We're just getting started." Her instincts prickled, whispering run, but his eyes held her, warm and familiar. She told herself she was overthinking it. This was Jake, the man who'd listened to her cry at 2 a.m., who'd called her beautiful when she felt like nothing. She sat back down, but the room felt smaller now, the walls pressing in. Jake's hand slid up her thigh, his touch bolder now. His kisses were deep, hungry, and Lila let herself fall into them, into the heat of his body against hers. The bulge she'd noticed earlier pressed against her, undeniable, and for a fleeting moment she felt powerful, wanted. Her hands explored his back, his shoulders, the strength of him intoxicating. But then his grip tightened, his nails digging into her arms. She pulled back, laughing nervously. "Easy, Tiger," she said, but his eyes had changed, cold, distant, like a stranger's. "Jake." Her voice trembled. He didn't answer. Instead, he pushed her down, his weight pinning her to the bed. Panic surged, sharp and cold. This wasn't the man she trusted, the one who'd promised to see her. She fought, her hands clawing at his shirt, but he was too strong. "Please stop," she cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. The pain was searing, a violation that tore through her body and soul. Her mind screamed for escape, but her limbs felt heavy, sluggish. The drink, she realized too late, had been spiked. As he moved over her, she caught a glimpse of something under the bed, a glint of metal, sharp and cruel. A knife? Her heart stopped. Had he planned this from the start? In a desperate burst of strength, Lila shoved him, rolling off the bed. Her knees hit the floor, pain shooting through her, but she scrambled for her purse, her phone, anything. Jake lunged, his fingers grazing her ankle, but she stumbled into the bathroom, slamming the door shut. Her hands shook as she fumbled with the lock, her breath coming in gasps. She dialed 911, whispering into the phone, "Help me please, he's going to kill me." The operator's voice was calm, asking for her location, but before she could answer, the line went dead. She stared at the screen, no signal. Her blood ran cold. She'd had bars in the parking lot. How was this possible? Jake's voice came through the door, low and eerily calm. Lila opened the door. "You're only making this harder." She backed against the wall, her eyes darting around the tiny bathroom. The window was too small to climb through, the tiles cold under her bare feet. Her purse lay on the floor, spilled open. Lipstick, keys, a pack of gum. No weapon. Then she heard it, a faint click like a key turning. The deadbolt in the main room. Her pulse roared in her ears. Someone else was out there. Was Jake not alone? The bathroom door flew open, splintering at the hinges, but it wasn't Jake. A woman stood there, older, maybe 50, with a scar slicing across her cheek like a warning. Her eyes were hard, glinting with something like disgust. "You shouldn't have come here," she hissed, grabbing Lila's arm with a grip like iron. Lila screamed, thrashing, but the woman was stronger than she looked, dragging her back to the bedroom. Jake stood by the bed, wiping blood from a scratch on his cheek where Lila's nails had caught him. "Took you long enough," he said to the woman, his voice flat, like they were discussing the weather. "Who are you?" Lila sobbed, her mind reeling. The woman didn't answer, just shoved her onto the bed, the mattress creaking under her weight. Jake picked up the knife from the floor, its blade catching the dim light like a cruel promise. "You trusted me," he said, his tone almost sad. "That was your first mistake." Lila's heart shattered as the truth hit her. Their late-night calls, his perfect words, the way he'd known exactly what to say. It wasn't just Jake. They'd played her, both of them, luring her here like a lamb to slaughter. But why? What did they want? Lila's screams filled the room as Jake leaned over her, the knife pressing against her throat. She thought of her mother's voice, singing her to sleep as a child. She thought of the diner, the jukebox that played the same 5 songs, the customers who never asked her name. She thought of the life she'd wanted, travel, love, a chance to be more than this. The blade bit, a cold, searing line across her skin. Blood poured over her blue dress, the one she'd chosen to feel beautiful in, soaking it dark. Her vision blurred, but she saw the woman watching, her face blank, almost bored. Jake didn't stop there. The knife moved again, deliberate, precise. Lila was slipping away, her body no longer hers, but the pain lingered as he carved at her, taking pieces of her with a sickening detachment. Her breasts, the parts of herself she'd once hated, then learned to love, were severed, a final theft of her dignity. She wanted to scream, to beg, but no sound came. The world faded, her last thought a fleeting wish for the rain to wash her clean. When it was over, Jake and the woman left, the motel room silent except for the relentless rain. Lila's body lay still, her eyes open, staring at the ceiling as if searching for the stars she'd once dreamed of. The neon sign outside flickered, casting faint shadows over the blood-soaked bed. Days later, the police would find her, the headlines screaming of a killer still out there. But no one would tell Lila's real story, the girl who'd saved for a trip she never took, who'd laughed at her own bad jokes, who'd hoped for love and found only death. The rain hadn't stopped in days, turning the small town into a sodden, gray blur. Sarah stood behind the diner counter, wiping the same spot over and over, her hands moving on autopilot. It had been a week since they found Lila, her friend, her confidant, the one person who'd made the endless shifts bearable with her quiet jokes and warm smiles. The memory of Lila's body, broken and bloodied in that motel room, haunted Sarah's dreams. The police had no leads, just a grainy photo of a man who called himself Jake, a ghost who'd vanished into the storm. But Sarah had something they didn't, the note. She'd found it tucked under a coffee mug the morning after Lila's death, the ink smudged but unmistakable. Lila's handwriting shaky, like she'd written it in a hurry. "If I don't come back, check Jake's profile. There's more than one." Sarah had read it 100 times, each word a knife in her chest. She'd gone to the site, the one Lila had mentioned once in a shy, wine-fueled confession. Jake's profile was gone, scrubbed clean, but another had caught her eye, a new face, same dark eyes, same crooked smile. The bio was a punch to the gut, looking for someone who's not afraid to feel. Sarah's hands had trembled as she stared at the screen, the diner's jukebox humming in the background. She didn't know what it meant, but she knew it wasn't a coincidence. Sarah was 28, tougher than she looked, with a sharp tongue and a knack for spotting lies. She'd grown up in this town, where secrets festered like mold, and she'd learned early to trust her gut. Lila's death wasn't random, it was planned, deliberate, and the note was Lila's last cry for help. Sarah couldn't let it go. She wouldn't. But where to start? The police had dismissed her, saying the note was too vague, that the site was a dead end. "People like that cover their tracks," the detective had said, barely looking up from his coffee. Sarah didn't care. She'd find the truth herself. That night, Sarah sat in her cramped apartment, the glow of her laptop casting shadows on the walls. The rain tapped the windows, a restless rhythm that matched her nerves. She opened the site again, scrolling past profiles that blurred together: men, women, promises of pleasure and pain. Then she saw it, the new profile she'd noticed before. Ethan. His photo showed a man in his 30s, lean and handsome, with those same dark eyes that seemed to see too much. His bio was identical to Jake's, word for word. Sarah's pulse quickened. She clicked, but the profile was sparse. No posts, no followers, just that one line and a message button. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. What was she doing? This wasn't a game. Lila had trusted someone like this, and it had cost her everything. But Sarah wasn't Lila. She'd be smarter, careful. She typed a message, simple, baiting: "Hey, saw your profile. You sound interesting." She hit send before she could second-guess herself, her heart thudding in the silence. The reply came almost instantly: "Glad you think so. What's your story?" Sarah stared at the words, her mouth dry. It was him, or someone like him. She could feel it. They chatted for hours, Sarah playing a role she hated: flirty, open, just vulnerable enough to keep him hooked. Ethan was smooth, asking about her dreams, her fears, mirroring her answers like he'd studied her. It was eerie, like talking to a shadow of Jake. When he suggested a video call, Sarah hesitated. Her gut screamed danger, but her need for answers was louder. She agreed, setting up her webcam, her kitchen knife tucked under a pillow nearby, just in case. The call connected, and Ethan's face filled the screen. He was handsome, no question, but those eyes, they were Jake's, or close enough to make her skin crawl. He smiled, and Sarah's stomach twisted. "You're even prettier than I imagined," he said, his voice low. "Familiar? Too familiar." She froze, her mind racing back to a night months ago when Lila had put her phone on speaker, laughing at something Jake had said. That voice, it was the same. Or was it? The rain outside roared, drowning her thoughts. Was she imagining things, or was Ethan more than a copycat? She played along, smiling, asking questions, but her hand stayed near the knife. Ethan's charm was polished, but there were cracks. Moments when his smile slipped, when his eyes went cold. He mentioned a motel, the same one where Lila had died. "Quiet place," he said. "Perfect for getting to know someone." Sarah's blood ran cold. Was he testing her? Did he know who she was? The call ended with a promise to meet, and Sarah sat there, staring at the blank screen, her heart pounding. She'd just invited a killer into her life. The next morning, Sarah was back at the diner, pouring coffee for truckers and locals, her mind elsewhere. She hadn't slept, Ethan's voice looping in her head. She'd saved the chat logs, taken screenshots, but it felt like grasping at smoke. Who was he? And what did Lila mean by more than one? Around noon, a man walked in, someone she didn't recognize. He was older, maybe 50, with a scar across his cheek. Not a clean one, but jagged, like it had been stitched badly. He sat at the counter, ordering black coffee, his eyes scanning the room. When they landed on Sarah, she felt a chill, like he was memorizing her. He didn't talk much, just sipped his coffee and left a tip. But as Sarah cleared his cup, she found a folded napkin underneath. Inside was a single word, scrawled in black ink: "Careful." Her breath caught. She looked out the window, but the man was gone, his car already pulling onto the highway. Was it a warning? A threat? Her hands shook as she pocketed the napkin, her eyes darting to the diner's entrance. Someone was watching her, she was sure of it. That night, Sarah went to Lila's apartment. The landlord hadn't cleared it out yet, and Sarah still had the spare key Lila had given her for emergencies. The place felt like a tomb, Lila's things untouched. Books stacked on the coffee table, a half-finished scarf she'd been knitting. Sarah's chest ached, but she pushed through, searching for anything that might explain the note. In Lila's bedroom, under a loose floorboard she'd once laughed about as her secret hideout, Sarah found a USB drive. She plugged it into her laptop, her hands unsteady. The drive held one file, a video. Lila's face appeared, pale, her eyes wide with fear. "If you're watching this, I'm probably gone," she said, her voice trembling. "Jake's not who he says he is. There's others, people helping him. I saw something I shouldn't have. Check the site, Sarah. It's bigger than him." The video cut off abruptly, static filling the screen. Sarah's heart raced. Others? What had Lila seen? And why hadn't she told her? Sarah kept talking to Ethan, feeding him just enough to keep him interested while she dug deeper. She found a forum buried in the site's underbelly, a place where users traded cryptic messages about meetings and marks. One post mentioned a motel, a date, tomorrow. The same motel where Lila died. Sarah's blood ran cold. Was Ethan planning another kill? Or was it someone else, part of the others Lila had warned about? She told herself to go to the police, but what would she say? They dismissed her before and she had no proof, just a video, a note, and a bad feeling. Against her better judgment, Sarah decided to go. She'd watch from a distance, see who showed up. She packed a bag, knife, pepper spray, her phone fully charged, and drove to the motel, the rain heavier now, like the sky was mourning Lila all over again. The parking lot was quiet, the neon sign flickering as always. Sarah parked across the street, her car hidden in the shadows. She watched the motel door, her breath fogging the window. Then she saw him, Ethan or Jake or whoever he was, stepping out of a black car, his silhouette unmistakable. But he wasn't alone. A woman was with him, older, her face half hidden by a hood. Sarah's heart stopped. Was that the woman from Lila's story, the one the police mentioned but never found? Before she could process it, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't be here." Sarah's blood turned to ice. She looked around, but the street was empty. When she glanced back at the motel, Ethan was staring right at her car, his smile sharp enough to cut through the rain. He raised a hand, beckoning her closer. Sarah's hands gripped the wheel, her mind screaming run while her heart demanded answers. Had she walked into a trap, or was this her chance to end it? The rain had become a constant in Sarah's life, a relentless curtain that blurred the edges of her small town. It soaked her shoes as she stood outside the diner, locking up after another late shift. 2 weeks had passed since that night at the motel when Ethan, or Jake, or whatever his real name was, had stared into her soul from across the parking lot, his smile a blade in the dark. The text she'd received, "You shouldn't be here," still burned in her mind, a warning she couldn't shake. Sarah was 28, sharp-witted and stubborn, but fear had taken root now, growing with every shadow that moved too fast. Lila's death wasn't just a tragedy anymore. It was a puzzle, and Sarah was entangled in its pieces. The napkin she'd found last week, marked with a red circle and slash, sat in a Ziploc bag in her purse, next to Lila's USB drive. That symbol had haunted her since she'd seen it in Lila's video, scrawled on a wall behind her friend's terrified face. Lila's words played on repeat. There's others, people helping him. It's bigger than him. Sarah had spent nights scouring the site, the dark corners of forums where users whispered about meetings and marks. She'd found more profiles, different names, different faces, but always those same dark eyes, the same bio, looking for someone who's not afraid to feel. Each one felt like a taunt, a breadcrumb leading her deeper into danger. Sarah hadn't gone to the police again. The detective's dismissive sneer still stung, and besides, what could she say? That she was chasing ghosts on a porn site? That a napkin and a dead friend's video were her only proof? No, this was hers to finish. Lila deserved that much. But Sarah wasn't reckless. She'd bought a stun gun, kept her knife close, and started locking her doors even during the day. The scarred man from the diner hadn't returned, but his warning, "Careful," echoed every time she opened the site. Someone was watching her, and she was running out of time to find out who. Sarah's laptop glowed in her darkened apartment, the rain a soft roar outside. She'd been messaging Ethan, playing the part of a curious stranger while her stomach churned. His replies were too perfect, mirroring her words like he'd cracked open her skull and read her thoughts. Tonight he'd sent something new, an address, a date, a time. Tomorrow night, at a warehouse on the edge of town, abandoned since the mill closed years ago. A private party, he called it. Just a few people who liked to feel. You'd fit right in. Sarah's heart thudded. This was it, the meeting she'd read about in the forums. A trap, maybe, but also her chance to see what Lila had stumbled into. She hesitated, her cursor blinking over the reply box. Every instinct screamed don't go, but the image of Lila's body, blood-soaked, carved apart, pushed her forward. She typed, "Sounds fun. Count me in." As soon as she hit send, her phone buzzed. Another unknown number, another text. Last chance to walk away. Sarah's breath caught. She checked her windows, her locks, but the street outside was empty, the rain swallowing any sign of life. Who was warning her? The scarred man? Someone else? And why did it feel like they were one step ahead? The next night, Sarah drove to the warehouse, her stun gun in her jacket, her knife strapped to her ankle. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving the air thick and cold. The building loomed like a carcass, its windows shattered, its walls tagged with faded graffiti. She parked a block away, her car hidden behind a rusted dumpster, and approached on foot, her boots silent on the wet pavement. The address Ethan had given led to a side door, propped open with a brick. Music pulsed faintly from inside, a low throb that felt alive. Sarah slipped through the door, her eyes adjusting to the dimness. The warehouse was a maze of crates and shadows, lit by flickering lanterns strung from the rafters. A dozen people milled about, men and women, young and old, their faces half hidden in the gloom. At the center was Ethan, his dark eyes scanning the crowd. He hadn't seen her yet. Sarah kept to the edges, her hand on the stun gun, her pulse racing. This wasn't a party, it was something else, something ritualistic. A table nearby held knives, ropes, and what looked like medical tools, gleaming under the lantern light. Her stomach twisted. Was this where Lila had been headed? Then she saw her, the woman from the motel, the one with Ethan that night. Older, her face sharp and unreadable, her hooded jacket hiding the scar Sarah knew was there. She moved through the crowd, whispering to a man who nodded and disappeared into the shadows. Sarah's blood ran cold. This was them, the others Lila had warned about. But what were they doing? Before she could move, Ethan's voice cut through the murmur, smooth and commanding. "We're here to feel," he said, his smile sharp, "to take what we deserve." The crowd murmured agreement, and Sarah realized with a jolt that she was surrounded. Sarah backed toward a crate, her hand tightening on the stun gun. She needed to get out, but the door she'd entered was blocked now, a man standing guard with a blank stare. Ethan's eyes found her then, locking on like a predator spotting prey. "Sarah," he said loud enough for the room to hear. "So glad you could join us." Her heart stopped. He knew her name, not the fake one she'd used online, but her real one. Oh, had he known all along? The crowd parted as he approached, his smile never wavering. "You're here for Lila, aren't you?" he said, his voice low, intimate. "She was special too. Curious like you." Sarah's throat tightened, anger and fear warring inside her. "What did you do to her?" she spat, her voice shaking. Ethan laughed, a sound that chilled her bones. "She saw too much, just like you're about to." Before she could react, the woman stepped forward, her hood falling back to reveal the scar, jagged and raw. "You should have listened," she said, her voice like gravel. Sarah's hand moved to the stun gun, but the woman was faster, grabbing her wrist with a strength that made her gasp. The crowd closed in, their faces eager, hungry. Sarah fought, kicking, twisting, but hands grabbed her, pinning her arms. Ethan leaned close, his breath hot on her face. "Don't worry," he whispered. "You'll feel everything." A shout broke the tension, sharp and sudden. The crowd turned as the scarred man from the diner burst through a side door, a gun in his hand. "Let her go," he roared, his voice raw with something like grief. Ethan's smile faltered, and the woman cursed, shoving Sarah to the floor. The scarred man fired, the shot echoing in the cavernous space, and chaos erupted. People scattered, crates toppled, and Sarah scrambled to her feet, her stun gun lost in the fray. The scarred man grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the door. "Move!" he barked, firing another shot as Ethan lunged after them. Sarah's mind raced. Who was this man? Why was he helping her? They stumbled into the rain, the warehouse a blur behind them. He shoved her into a truck, peeling out before she could catch her breath. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice hoarse. He didn't look at her, his eyes fixed on the road. "Someone who lost too much," he said. Lila wasn't the first. They drove to a cabin deep in the woods, the rain a distant hum now. Inside, the scarred man, whose name he said was Tom, told her everything. He'd been hunting them for years, a group that called themselves the Circle. They weren't just killers, they were collectors, preying on lonely hearts, luring them with promises of connection only to strip them of everything, body and soul. Lila had stumbled onto their network, seen something in Jake's files that marked her for death. Tom's sister had been one of their victims years ago, her body found in a motel not unlike the one where Lila died. "They're everywhere," Tom said, his voice heavy. "The site's just one tool. They use it to find marks, people no one will miss." Sarah's chest ached, Lila's face flashing in her mind. "Why me?" she asked. Tom's eyes met hers, weary. "Because you didn't let her go. They don't like loose ends." He showed her a folder, photos, names, dates. Dozens of victims stretching back decades. Ethan was one of many, a pawn in a larger game. The woman, Tom said, was higher up, a recruiter who picked the targets. The symbol, the circle with a slash, was their mark, a signature left on those they claimed. Sarah's hands shook as she realized how close she'd come to being next. Sarah and Tom knew they couldn't run forever. The circle would find them just as they'd found Lila. So they planned. Tom had contacts, ex-cops, hackers, people who'd lost loved ones to the group. Sarah used her access to the site, leaking the warehouse location to a forum she knew the police monitored. She baited Ethan, sending one last message. I know what you are. I'm ready to feel. It was a risk, but she was done hiding. The trap was set at the motel, the same one where Lila died. Sarah stood in the parking lot, rain soaking her hair, her knife in her pocket, Tom hidden nearby with his gun. Ethan arrived first, alone, his smile as sharp as ever. You're braver than she was, he said, stepping closer. Sarah's heart pounded, but she held her ground. This ends tonight, she said. Before Ethan could reply, headlights flared. Police cars screeched into the lot, sirens blaring. Ethan's smile vanished, his hand reaching for a knife, but Sarah was faster, driving her blade into his side. He staggered, blood blooming dark, and Tom emerged, tackling him to the ground. The woman appeared then, running from a car, but the police were on her, cuffs snapping shut. Sarah watched, rain mixing with tears, as Ethan's eyes met hers one last time, empty now, like a mask had slipped. The circle wasn't finished, Tom warned her of that. Some would slip away, regroup, start again. But for now, Sarah had won. She'd given Lila justice, or as close to it as she could. Back at the diner, she framed Lila's note, hanging it behind the counter where no one would notice. It was her reminder, to keep fighting, to keep feeling, to never let the rain wash away the truth. Who was the young man in the diner, and what role does he play in the circle's plans? Is Tom still out there, hunting them, or has he become another victim? What secret did Lila uncover that's still worth killing for? And most importantly, can Sarah break the circle for good, or is she destined to be its next mark? What do you think, viewers? Is Sarah walking into another trap, or is she one step ahead this time? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear who you suspect and what you think Lila knew. If this story gripped you, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel for more heart-pounding tales, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Let's unravel this mystery together.